Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with this Thursday expert and good friend of the channel, Mr. Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. One thing that I don't think I've ever asked you, at least directly, I think we may have talked around it over the last year or so, is what makes a good, large multifamily deal? Is it the value add? Is it the area? What are the kind of things that you look at that says, hey, I'm going to dig into that one a little deeper?
I mean, there are a lot of components to this, right? So it's not a single metric that I'm looking at. But if somebody shows me a deal, the very first thing I'm going to do is go and look at the market itself.
Okay.
Right.
So you get 123 Main Street, you're going to go, okay, it's in Knoxville, Tennessee. You're going to look at Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah. If I don't know the market already, I'm going to go look at the market. And the first thing I'm going to look for is population growth.
Okay.
If I see decent population growth, then I'm like, okay, it meets the first test.
All right.
And then it really becomes about a number of different things. But if I talk about sort of and you can't always get everything on your checklist, right? But the things that I like to see are, so in looking at the market, some kind of economic diversification.
Okay.
Right?
Multiple big employers
and
industries,
then,
probably.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be super concentrated in one thing, right? Including, say, the military. That makes me very nervous because
San Diego got smacked years ago. Yep.
Yeah, the military base can, they say they're there forever and then they change.
They change their mind.
So, having that in addition to other stuff is fine. But if you have, I just stay away from places where like the main driver is a military base, because you just don't know when that's going to change, right? So, however, other things that I call anchors, I love to have. So, for instance, a state capital is a great anchor because that is never going anywhere, right?
That makes sense.
State capitals also tend to have a good base of affluent renters because people are constantly going in and out of government all the time. Right? And every change of administration brings in a whole bunch of new people. And so people are not buying houses to do their government.
Okay.
job, right?
Makes sense.
At the top level, anyway. I mean, the lower level, functionaries, they're there. That's where they live. But it's a very, very steady source of employment, right? Another thing that I really like are major universities. Because they're this very similar, right? When you have a major university, then that tends to be really recession resistant.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen that.
And so, because again, those universities, those students are showing up and paying tuition no matter what, right? There may be, any given individual student may have trouble paying their tuition, but there's always someone in line behind them.
Correct.
Right?
Makes sense.
To come in and take their place. So those are really good anchors, as I like to call them, right? And there are some places around the country where you can have both, like Madison, Wisconsin is the state capital and a major university town. And it has done extremely well during recessions because it's so, I haven't invested there myself, but it's so sort of buffeted against economic fluctuations because it's not dependent on business, right? But then it obviously has a lot of like other ancillary businesses that are around there because of the state capital, university, stuff like that.
Makes sense.
So that is a good one. Major health complexes, other thing, right? Because those, again, basically impervious to what's going on with the economy. You get cancer, you're going to the hospital, whether the economy is good or not.
Good or bad, yeah.
Right? So that's another thing that I like to see. Another one that I like to see, and this is one I usually don't hear other people talking about, is what are called logistics hubs, right? So not simply like a big Amazon distribution center, I mean, even though that's good, but a transshipment point. So basically, any time that they are moving goods from one form of transportation to another, so
like train to trucks or
ship to train to truck, right?
Got it. Okay. I like
plane to truck, whatever it is. Those are like massive infrastructure developments that take years and years to plan and build. And once they're planned and built, they don't move because it takes decades to build
Yeah,
another.
decades and lots of dirt. Yeah, I like that.
So
Okay.
those
That's
are
a good
also
one.
really good, although they're a little bit more, you know, the economy matters a little bit more for them because obviously there's going to be more or
Sure.
less shipping depending on the economy, but still, like, they're not going anywhere,
Right.
right? So maybe it'll be rough, but it's coming back, right? If it's bad.
I like that.
So those are kind of like major anchors that are good to have nearby. And then the other anchor, but this is a little more sort of granular, is good schools, right? So good schools are always, you know, kind of like a home run case in a way, is like when you can find a, you know, we always talk about like, oh, you want to find like the C asset and the B neighborhood so you can upgrade it, or the B asset and the A neighborhood so you can upgrade it. But you also like want to see like the B or the C asset in like the top-notch school district.
Got it.
Because,
and this is obviously grade school through high school.
Yes. Yeah. And so because you, first of all, even if you don't do an upgrade, those assets tend to attract the best tenants because the tenants, because those are the tenants who are like, I want to be close to this good school. I want my kids to be in this good school. And so at any level, whether it's A, B, or C, it's a better A class, better B class, or better C class tenant in a good school district, right? So, and the rents probably reflect that as well. So those are, and they're very sticky, right? Because once they're in there in that school district, like they're going to stay in the school district. They're not moving to another town or something, you know, and there may be limited options for them. That's why I kind of like the C property in the A area with the good schools is great, because there's probably no other C properties that they can afford to live in that school district, and they want to take the kids out of the school. So they'll do everything to pay their rent, right? So those are really good. Then once you see that stuff, then, you know, you look at the numbers, right? And the school district is one that's kind of like a like to have, not a have to have, but, you know, because otherwise, you know, there aren't a gazillion great school districts around. So it does kind of limit, if you're going to strictly limit yourself to that, you'd have trouble finding deals. But I really like it when you find something like that. And if you're kind of targeting markets, it's good to know where the good school districts are, so that when a property pops up in one of your, you know, checkbox areas, you can just pounce on it because it's like, okay, I know this property, this is where I want it to be. Then you're digging into the numbers. And when you're digging into the numbers, then it really becomes about sort of the overall return, right? How sort of on an IRR basis, like over the life cycle of this deal, do I think this is going to return enough to get investors interested and also for me to make money? But another thing that sort of where we are in the market, you know, my thinking has really also changed. And I think if to be prudent, you have to be doing this, to be thinking a lot less about how much money you're going to be making and about how well this asset's going to perform if things go sideways, and how well it's going to protect investor capital. Because at the end of the day, it's really all about protecting investor capital. And, you know, I mean, in any kind of investment business, over the long haul, you win by not losing, right? You don't win by winning more, you win by not losing, because you can win a lot, but if you lose big a few times, it wipes it all out.
So Warren Buffett's rule number one, don't lose money.
Right. You win by not losing. So if you should focus on the like sort of worst case scenario planning. And does,
agreed,
if cap rates go up, you know, like how far do they have to go up for you to lose money, right? If it's like a point, forget it. Don't do that deal, right? Because it could easily go up a point.
Oh, easy. See video one from today.
Yeah, if it's 3 points, probably not likely.
Probably okay,
right? So, and you know, you got to lock in long-term debt that's fixed rate. You know, who cares if interest rates drop if you've got fixed rate debt? But it really helps you if they go up, right? And so
I like that.
That's another thing. So you're really kind of looking at, am I going to be able to preserve investor capital? And along those lines, I mean, value add includes risk, right? Because you have to execute your value add. But there are more or less risky ways to do that, right? And a well-executed value add is actually a great way to preserve investor capital, because you have increased your rent so much, you've grown your NOI, you've grown your equity, that your equity cushion is now much bigger.
Right.
So you can withstand more fluctuations and all of
Mhm.
this stuff out
Mhm.
there. But there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. Or I shouldn't say a good way and a bad way. I should say a more risky way and a less risky way to do it. So the more risky way to do it is to finance it with, bridge debt where they're paying for part of your construction and all that. The better way to do it is lock in long-term debt and go raise extra money from your investors to do the value.
Yes, that's the key.
Do it as equity rather than as debt, but also get your fixed long-term debt.
Mhm.
Now you may not be able to, if it's like a distressed asset, you can't get fixed long-term debt because it's not stabilized. That may be an issue. But if you're talking about like a stabilized C property that you want to upgrade to a B, the best way to do that is buy it, as the C property, right?
Mhm.
With the debt that you can get, lock that debt in, raise the additional capital from your investors, do your value add, and then you can supplement your debt to bring it up to the LTV that you want and maybe return some investor capital, which is also a great way to preserve their capital is to give it back to them. But that's kind of like the kind of preferred, at least in my mind, preferred way to do it. But your returns won't be as high, but it's a safer way to do it.
Yeah. This has been awesome. I guess kind of two questions rounding this one out. Does age of building impact you at all? Like, hey, I won't touch anything built in the 70s, or is there a number?
Yeah, I mean, I have become reluctant to buy stuff before 1980s.
Okay.
Just because that stuff's getting really old right now.
Yeah, it is. Big capital expenses coming.
Yeah, and the 70s was not a great time for construction too, right? I mean, because people, I think a lot of people don't realize there was a massive amount of building in the 70s, right? It was huge because that's when the baby boom generation hit like renting age.
Yep.
And there was this huge amount of construction. And it was also much easier to build because they didn't have the same building codes, the same zoning requirements. There was a lot of open farmland where you could buy stuff. Like suburbanization was in full swing. Like it was a lot easier to build. So a ton of stuff got built in the 70s. And because of that, there was a lot of corners being cut. There were a lot of experiments that turned out not so well, like aluminum wiring and things like that.
Yeah.
That they thought were okay at the time.
Yeah, not good.
You might
Fire
get
hazard.
Look at asbestos in those buildings.
Yeah.
You probably got galvanized plumbing, which is really, showing its age at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you've got a lot of stuff like that on these buildings that not so great. So, and it's kind of going now. So you have to go in with a good capital budget to be addressing a lot of things in those older properties. So, for me, and I think probably for a lot of other people, it's not like this is a secret, but I think going in looking for stuff that, 1990s for you and me doesn't sound like that long ago, but this is now 30 years ago, right?
That's true. It's 30 years.
Yeah. So it's that kind of age of property is sort of the sweet spot for value add right now.
And then kind of the last question is how much is too much value add? Like, I mean, is it, if it's a vacant, totally distressed property and, you've got, I don't know, you're buying it 2 million, but it takes another 2 million to I mean, is there a ratio that's kind of like too much?
Maybe for me.
Yeah.
I mean, but there are people who specialize in that, right?
Oh, okay.
There's an expert for every kind of play. And there are definitely people who know what to do with a shell and can like rebuild a shell and explain to you why it's cheaper to do that than it is to tear it down and start again or whatever.
I asked that because I remember in the last crash, the one building I didn't touch was a 57 unit. So would have been the most units I ever bought at one time, but it was a shell. It was complete. It was surrounded by fence. It had been, vacant for a while, bad stuff happens to vacant units. I was like, yeah, that's cheap. But, I think back then it's like, it was 2.7 and I probably had to put 2 million in to get it livable again. It was like, nope, too much.
That seems like a lot for a vacant property too.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm going from, this was 12 years ago. Whatever it was like, it was close to a ratio. Whatever I was paying, I needed the same amount for repairs. Right. I was like, nope.
Yeah.
I
mean, that could be a great play if it's in the right area, but you're basically building a whole new property inside the shell at that point. But it still could be worth it, like if you run the numbers and it works. But it's basically, it's almost like a new construction project, right?
Yeah, and for me it was the timeline. It's like I had all the team. I actually had the money access. But I was like, by the time I get these 10 done, I got to get, and then it was like, how am I going to be a property manager and a developer? I'm like, and I live 3 hours away. I'm like, never mind. I'll find other deals. There's plenty of deals. I'll go somewhere else.
Listen, I mean, if a deal scares you or seems overwhelming, it's probably a good reason not to do it.
Yeah, do something else.
You know, I mean, just because you're not there yet, right? So,
Thank you. I like
but
that.
I think, you know, what people are typically doing on value add is really, you know, a combination of some curb appeal
Mhm.
and fixing up the units, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of, you know, maybe they might be putting on new roofs, maybe new windows, right?
Yeah,
But
maybe a couple of the things. Yeah, but
yeah, but it's generally speaking, I mean, what you're looking to do is just be, you know, first dealing with the exteriors, trying to make it more attractive.
Yeah.
So,
Get people to stop by. Yeah.
right, just make it, you know, when people are driving by, they notice that it's not, looks nicer, right? So
Mhm.
you're
Yeah. Always
new,
outside in.
new landscaping, new, if you got like those dated like 1970s mansards or whatever, just like really bad design, you know, people are coming in and like recladding things, putting on new siding,
Yeah.
just making it look nicer, changing the paint scheme.
Yeah.
And then when that's done and you've got people now coming to the property, you can actually upgrade the units as people are coming in.
Correct.
So you say to them like, you know, and what a lot of people are doing these days is they'll take in prospective tenants and they'll say, you got a choice. Here's what they call a classic unit, which is
Classic unit.
Which is- it's cleaned up,
Yeah.
but not refurbished,
Right. Classic.
or a remodeled unit, which will be all brand new, everything. And which do you want, right? And
that's awesome.
if you want the remodeled unit, it's going to cost you more. But the great thing about doing it that way is that now you know you've got somebody who's renting it before you spend the money to rehab
Beautiful.
it, which is better than the old way of doing things, which was where it's good to go and like just rehab everything. You may not even need to. You may be able to get rent increases with doing nothing.
Yeah.
So why spend the money?
That's awesome. Well, Jonathan, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate this conversation. How can people find you?
So if you would like to join my investor list, please Google Two Bridges Asset Management LLC and fill out the form you'll find on the website. And if you would like to join my free Facebook group and 12,000 of Michael's best friends,
Yeah.
You can go on Facebook and search for multifamily investment community and just answer the questions that you're asked when you're prompted. You could actually do both of those things. You don't have to do one or the other. You could actually be an investor and join the group too.
I recommend it.
I urge you to do both.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.